basic biographies for a lot of them, simply because they don't exist unless you interview them face to face. And most, unless you're like the Star or Bernama, you don't have resources to go in Terengganu and meet the 160 candidates there, right? So you'd only have the key figures. Maybe you'll know one Saiful or something from ideas, but you have no idea about one Bindola, who's a fisherman there, unless you go there and you find out his background. So that's a really bad part. So, so after doing this, we realized that one, the information was hard to get. Would be like a website like this, and that's it. It just dies. And then the data is scattered there, but it's not very useful for people. And we kept on, and this is pretty high on the Google search list at that time. So people kept asking us, do you have data on this person or this and this? And we say, this is all we've got. And random people would ask us questions like, I need to do research on how many women candidates are there. Or I need to know how many women MPs. What's the makeup of women MPs for political parties? And if you're a researcher, this would be one source, but then you have to go through each one. And then if you didn't, you'd have to go through the election polls and then now tag them, because they don't have gender information. So now you got to figure out from each name and build your own database each time, right? And if you want to find the contact addresses, what we also found, which MCCHR did, was that MPs actually have on their website their official addresses. So MCCHR, as part of their project, actually sent, registered posts, right? Letters to each of the addresses. A lot of them bounced back. So the official addresses are not even official addresses, right? So this is bad for our democracy, because they're your elected reps and you can't even contact them. The phone numbers are wrong. So what usually happens is that if you're a journalist, you would quickly call your friends. Hey, does anybody have this? Some of your friends is going to know the aide, who's the assistant to this, who has the number of somebody like that, right? So the journalists in this room know what I'm talking about. So that's how you get the contacts, right? And slowly you build. So most of us have all the parliamentary aides. So you'll also your colleagues on the parliamentary beat that have all the contacts and can get all the information. But again, that's really hard. It's not always accurate. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort just to find the right number to get somebody. This aide knows this aide, who has the number, who knows that Mat Sabu is here, and that's how you contact him, right? And then so it's really hard. And if it's hard for a journalist, imagine how it is for a normal person on the street. Right? you wouldn't have contacts on your addresses to find. So that's one problem. So from a democratic viewpoint, it's hard for us to find out, and it's also hard for NGOs like MCCHR to do campaigns. Oh, call your reps. Wait a second, the number it's not accurate, or we don't have the number, or they have service centers and it doesn't exist, or it's the wrong address, right? So, oops, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So what we then learned was that, okay, we got to be a bit smarter on this because the information was difficult. So what we found out was we actually reached out. They work for UK. So we found UK matches the Malaysian one best. So a lot of Malaysians are asking, let's have this website like this, right? And from our work from the past 5 years, we know that it's almost impossible to do this because there's no data to do this. For example, if you want written answers, until we worked with Ong Kiang Meng for Serdang, these written answers were not online. They were either in the parliamentary library, or you'd have to ask the MPs for a copy or one of their aides for a copy, right? So we actually, so just to have something like this was not possible until a few years ago, or at least until Ong Kiang Meng gave me the scanner. So now we actually have, for example, scan parliamentary documents for all the questions. So, for example, and this includes all the questions from your reps. Let's ask topic, right? North Korean. This is an interesting question, right? When I did search here, there was actually a couple of questions where people were asking how many North Korean workers were in Malaysia. And now you can actually find out where these North Korean workers are and how many and where they live and so on in these questions and who asked them. But before this, it was not even online. So to make a website like this requires a whole lot of different data information that is not in digital format. So that's what CNAR does. We try to get all these missing pieces so that we can have a site like They Work For You. And because in Malaysian Parliament, it's actually not too bad. They publish quite a lot of information, but quite often it's bad. It's incomplete. There's no written answers. You cannot get attendance. That's another one. We've had a couple of MPs try to ask the speaker. You cannot get attendance records. So if you ever see a report by Malaysia TV, it means one of their reporters actually had to sit there and count and keep tabs on who was actually there. And then they have to call their parliamentary whips. For those of you not familiar, parliamentary whip is the person for a party that says all of you have to vote this way. And the parliamentary whip, I think it's Anthony Loke for DAP, he would actually have a list of all the MPs that he calls and says you have to be in to vote against, let's say, a bill or something. So they call them, then they check. So that's how hard it is to get this kind of basic information. So coming from that, so just getting the things that were not there before online is already a big challenge. So parliamentary documents, we all have it from 2013, thanks to Ong Kiang Ning. The ones before, we don't have it. Hopefully he'll get elected again this election so that we will continue getting these nicely scanned documents. Okay, so the next step then is that, okay, the next thing that people ask is that, okay, I want to have a website such as this. Like They Work For You. I want to find out all the information for my MPs, right? So let's go to the first one, Diane Abbott. Okay, so votes are not possible. Okay, so if you notice that they have basic profiles like, you know, Twitter accounts and whatnot to build this website. So without this data, we cannot build this website. Without information on the past posts that they held, in a format, we cannot build this. We are not tracking, for example, their membership in bills, so we don't know. Are they on the PAC? There's a couple of public committees. Do we know which one our parliamentarians are? We don't. So somebody actually has to put that in a data form. And then they come in and out of these committees. Somebody also has to track them out. If we don't have a spreadsheet for that, we won't know, or like what committees they're in. So you'll have to go to the parliamentary website, and you'll only have the committee now. You'll have to dig through the papers if you want to find out who was on the committee 2 years ago. So it's hard. So this is very basic, but as I shared before, just very basic information such even their picture parties is not complete. So it's hard to build an application for this. You can build a basic database of profiles and whatnot, like in a wiki format. But if you want to extract all this information and build a mobile app, it'll be very hard if you're a developer. You need an API and REST. So, quick rush through history is that we ask our UK friends, My Society, who does that website, and says, so how did you do it? Like, what did you do to build it, and so on. They're nice because they get to work with the parliamentary digital services in UK who give them all the data nicely in CSV. Actually, I've had more interaction with the UK Parliament Digital Services Center than I have with the Malaysian one. And they actually advise me on things, but the Malaysian one doesn't give me information. So what they had was, this is more useful for developers, is that they actually had a database that allows people to enter data information on, just like what we're doing now, that allows them to then build applications off it. And so the first So after 2013 elections, we said, let's have a go at this, and we used their system and try to build a website for my MP. So my MP I think they only had a budget of like 5,000 ringgit or something, not that much. So the problem with 5,000 ringgit budget website is that once you do it, you can't maintain it. So what we told them was, build that website for 5,000 ringgit, but tell your developer to link to this database, so that as we update the information, you get the more and more complete information of all the different MPs. So the developer just has to kind of create the template, and then as the information comes in, it comes in. So as a result, we have myMP.media Malaysia. That's actually using the UK database still right now. So for example, let's just pick one of these guys, right? So Stephen Sim. So this webpage, most of these things, all these details, Twitter, contact, email addresses, and so on, is actually pulled from the UK database that we were using. And if we update his database there, his email will also be fixed. If he switches to a different constituency, it will also be updated, right? So it's so as a developer, you only need to. The only part that was not is basically the template and some of this biography, which was custom to NCCHR, but all the other information, his mugshot and everything, is from the database. So that's why we're kind of doing the spreadsheet, because as a developer, like say for the candidate website, I would just build the template, but as we improve the data, it gets better and better. And then after they're elected, even if it's incomplete, as we know more about them, the website just gets better and better, and as we get more information about them. If you're doing a mobile app, for example, you might have only, let's say for Selangor, you might only have complete information of 10 at this time. But if you're using this, later on their pictures start showing up, their addresses start showing up, and so on. It's a lot easier for you to, and not waste time just getting the information again and again and again and again, right? So, but the problem was that this is useful for general research. The problem was that the UK guys then decided, it's like, okay, since in their case they get nice data out of all their politicians, they actually just worked on set lists of politicians with complete data for all their different MPs and whatnot. But they were trying to do it for the world. The problem for us was that for Malaysia, for example, so they've got 1,000 people. The problem for us was that they are dependent. Wait, it didn't work. Okay. So again, they are dependent on Wikipedia as well. So you'll notice that they're all missing the data. And that's all the information they know about it. What's their profile, whatnot, they don't know.
Under the UK website, the public is allowed to contribute, right?
The UK is a bit nicer because the UK, you can get it from the politicians, right? So, okay, so in terms of their elected representatives, they actually have a division called Parliamentary Digital Services. And you can email them and they give you the data and spreadsheets in XML format, everything that a developer needs to build, or the data that you need, right? And if you ask, and then almost all their MPs are required, for example, to do asset declarations and whatnot. So you can actually go to the website from the UK part and just get the information. So, so in their case, there's not much the public has to do. They are already providing it by default.
But under the Malaysia, myMP site,
we had to, the basic information, we could get it from the parliamentary website, their pictures. But all their other stuff, like their profiles, like I said, even their addresses were wrong for a lot of them. Their numbers were wrong. Until just a few weeks ago, Muhyiddin's email was still the Ministry of Education on their website, right? so that's a big problem for Malaysia, is that the official one is not reliable. Also, it's incomplete, right? So like I said, we don't have the basic CVs. In the UK, they all publish their CVs publicly. Even their local councillors all have their CVs on their websites. We don't. Why? Because some of them graduated from Preston University or some fake degree mill, right? So So yeah, this is all we know about them, and actually we have more information for a lot of this, and I'll show you why we're doing the spreadsheets. So what about crowdsourced funding things? So your next MP. Okay. So this is the part when they had their elections last year, was it, the UK elections? So what they did instead was, okay, they did a similar thing. So for your next MP, I'm not sure if I have there. Yeah. So when they did my next MP, they also had to use a standard spreadsheet, or they put it in a database to collect crowdsourced information on their MPs or their candidates. And that was how they built your next MP. So they had to, so each candidate had to get all their CVs published and so on. And this is what we're actually doing now, which is trying to get as much information as we can get, put it in a standard format that everybody can use because it's so hard to get it. And then everybody can build their own websites, right? So what we tell people is that the data that we collect here is usable by everybody. There's the other thing that we call it open data, because one is in structured format, but then the licensing that we give for everybody is that you're free to use it however you wish. If you're somebody from Barisan Nasional and you want to build a profile of all the opposition to use it, it's fine. If you want to build a mobile app for this, it's fine. If you want to build a website for this, it's fine. Like you can, if you want to research it, everybody can reuse this data, and we're all collaborating for it because it's so hard to get. So okay, and again, the same thing. Remember the Obama, the U.S. elections, right? So you get all these nice graphs and so on. People often ask senior projects, like, why can't you build a website like that? One, we don't have $50 million in funding, but the other one is that there's no data. So even Google, when you do the searches, like on politicians, they're dependent on Wikipedia data. The pictures also from us. And if our data is mostly complete, if they're going to do profiles on their elections, we're in touch with the Google guys in Malaysia as well. If they wanted to do an elections page, they're going to be dependent on the data that we have. There's nobody else with the data. So a lot of the work that we're doing this one is basically the best available data on the general candidate that's in the public space. Of course, each news agency has their own little databases, but that's not public. So, okay. So how are we going to do this? Let me just quickly do a quick visual for those of you who haven't seen it before. Okay. So the overall idea here, some of it is technical, is that everybody contributes, different people. So even Malaysia Kini helps with sharing some of the data on candidates, for example. And we all put it into this spreadsheets that we are doing, and then we import it into a central database, which has this historical information. So every information that we had on previous MPs, the people that are connected to different GLCs, the appointments they've got, as much information as we have, it's all in that database. And once we put it in that database, you can reuse it for different things, right? So these are actually real things I can share. So we reuse it for Uni Malaysia. We could quickly get statistics, for example, how old are politicians? What's the oldest one? Tunku Razale is the oldest. I think second is Kids Young. Who's the youngest? I think it's Zyril by a few days over Stephen Sim. I think I need to double check on it. But then the data is there for you to do that, right? And that's the point of doing this, is that we keep adding to this, and everybody has different standards, but we put it into one single standard, and everybody can keep reusing this information. So even after this elections, we are continuously adding more information. Let's say a common one, because it happens so often. Let's say MCCHR has a project that says, I need to do, or Empower has a project that says, we need to do women's empowerment in Parliament, and we need to have all the things. So they're going to collect the latest contact list of all the women MPs. If they collect it and put it in there, now we've got updated information on women MPs, for example. So it keeps on improving as we do research. And this is already successful in Myanmar, so we kind of know where we're heading for Malaysia with this data. Okay, so the Myanmar election site or candidates representative site is actually on our servers. So they already had this exercise, except instead of the public, they actually had about 5 or 6 NGOs all collaborating together. So let me see how many NGOs there are. Right, yeah. So they had like about 5 or 6 different NGOs all collaborating together to get the best information they can for the elected reps. And as a result, so their developer, we have one developer here, their developer only took about 2-3 weeks to build the template for this. And all the other information, they just pulled it from the public API that we provided. So, including dual language, right? So I'll switch it to English. Anybody from Myanmar? No. Because I can't read that. So in their case, for example, that you can quickly search. I think this is the biggest party, right? You can quickly search and get all the details on all the representatives. So as you can see, they also have problems where for some of the state ones, they don't have pictures. But as they get the pictures collected, they will also get the app will just automatically update. So in their case, yeah, they actually have all the different people, including their phone numbers. So there was a developer then so iOS, OpenMooc, or I think they have both. So another developer then said, okay, let's just use the API and I'm going to do this as in-app. So in their case, they use the database and they can quickly search for the elected reps and just call them, right? Without having to Google and find out. And it will be the latest. So in their case, it was their first elections ever. So they were really excited. It's like, oh my God, I elected him, now fix my pothole, right? Because now they can actually find out and get the numbers and addresses for all of them. So same thing for us. All these collections will be helpful for developers to build applications and whatnot. Without this data, it's not possible. You can build a mobile app, but you will not have pictures, contact addresses. The numbers will be outdated, as I shared, or wrong, and so on. So yeah, they've already done it. So Myanmar's ahead of us. And now we're doing the same thing finally for Malaysia. So hopefully after this general elections, we will also be able to spin up a website like them. So if you want to develop one, I would say go ahead. For developers, this is how the backend looks like for Sina project. It looks something like this. Not really useful for the general public, but if you're a developer, you know that it's a REST API and you can get all the images for different people. You can also search. So let me search. Okay, let's say I want to look who has been involved in a scandal lately. Okay, I think this is the guy. Okay, so yeah, this is the guy who was on the Exco for Johor that was extracted. So we have the database. So if you're a developer, you can actually quickly get information on where he is, his picture. I stole that one from the Sun, and other positions that he's held as a developer. So this is how we're going to contribute on the back end, right? And then after that, the developers would use this. So if you're a developer, you can contact us later. We actually have the docs for the API as well, search and so on. That is there. So this is all also publicly available. So if we often tell developers, like, don't build your own. We already have it all. It's in an international standards format. We just use it, and then all of us are contributing to make the data better. So yeah. Okay. Any questions so far? That's the history of it, basically. So the summary of it is this: everybody wants something like they work for you, UK. We all want to have your next MP for UK. And ideally, we would have something like the US presidential elections, and we can track the votes and so on. sad case is there's very limited data, and very limited data in the public for developers to actually build this application. So as a result, we have to crowdsource this data, and then we have to all help, like we're all working together to actually build this so that all of us can build the apps or do our research, right? There's one more other use on this. This would be of interest to the Edge, is that this data is also useful for transparency and anti-corruption. So what could we do, for example, with public information on all of our politicians, right? So we actually build applications. So for example, we've got the information on all the contractors, construction contracts in Malaysia from 2000 to 2015. So what we did was we reused the database and we matched them against, so all the names that you're importing now, we can then reuse it and we match them against contracts to find out which politicians had which contracts, right? So this guy, Shaifihi Ahmad, for example, his name is in our database, and we could find out that, well, he's not such a major thing. He probably was a small-time contractor with 36,000 ringgit, right? How about other bigger ones? So just now there was a guy called Latif, right? This is the guy who got caught by MCCC. So you'll notice that in our database, he's a parliamentary representative into, was he? Maybe he was. Okay. So he was the guy who got arrested by MACC, and we matched his name, and we could see that he got 62 million ringgit worth of contracts while he was in the Exco Bumiputra consortium or something. So he was on the Exco of the Johor state government, giving contracts to himself, and his contracts are, building, schools, Rumah Guru, Baik Puleh. So he was basically giving contracts to himself, but he was the board of directors for this. So we can reuse this information for other things as well. So one of the things that CNAR does is that the candidate is nice for public, but we're also using it for transparency. And it also helps us, for example, okay, let's just check this guy, for example. Abi Bandi. So if we have thousands of these addresses, so all the names that we collect later, some of them are not going to declare their assets and whatnot. Actually, data.occrp. So once we have the names of the thousands of people, then we can try searching for this guy, for example. And I'll take out the bin and see if he comes up in any court cases around the world, right? So all this information that we get, well, what you know, he's on UN ODC drugs and crime, right? Right? So the names that we collect is also useful for all these other things, right? So now instead of finding name by name, if you're a developer, one of the things that you can contribute towards transparency is write little scripts, right? So a script that says for loop in 4,800 names, match, whatever in ICIJ, and if it matches, you can give an alert to your journalist friends or something like that, right? I won't name the journalist that got excused for that, but yeah. But these are the things that can also be reused with the data. So it's useful for so much more than the general elections, right? Time is it now? We're on 10:33. Okay. I'm really curious to open that, but I'm not. Okay. So any questions on that? You have an idea of what we're doing now, right? We're all collecting the central database. Everybody's contributing to this database. But at the same time, it's helpful for everybody because the database is freely usable for everyone. It's usable for different purposes. And for developers, there's also already a public API that you can just use to build mobile apps and whatnot. So there's a ton of different ways to use them. Okay. Now, back to how we're going to start. For those of you who are curious, we actually, for example, from the same database, for those of you doing analysts, we actually did a network graph of all the politicians for 1MDB. That's also in the database. So we could actually reuse the names that we're inputting to actually see who's with who and so on if we slowly build the database. So for example, for 1MDB, we could actually automatically extract out all their connections together. And this was in 2015. I don't know whose names now match in 2018, right? And as all of our efforts will now help improve doing this as well to see how all the different people can match. Okay. I think we can have a short break for me talking. If anybody wants, we have water and coffee here if you want before I switch. Or do you want to keep going? All right. Okay. Okay, first things first. Nobody's gonna go, I'm the realist. I can generic profiles. If you haven't already, one of the things that we do, because all of us are gonna go back and kind of work on this on our own. So we kind of need an easy place. Anybody here use Slack before? No. Okay, I know that's one. So Slack allows us to easily collaborate and share together online. It's like a virtual chat room. Okay, Steve. Yeah. Okay. Where is that food? Who's is there? Okay. So one of the things is that we have a kind of little semi-private chat room where we all discuss like questions. We also share. I'll actually open that. There's actually a quick how-to guide as well there, where we actually share all the information that we keep getting.
Too much information.
Too much information. Yeah. Okay, so I also talked to Malaysia Kini. So Malaysia Kini is also collaborating with us. So they're also so we're also tagging. They're also tagging by the codes, right? So for those of you who are more familiar, like who are on social media all the time, at least me and Malaysia Kini, us and Malaysia Kini, we kind of standardized saying that let's use GE14 as a tag and then use the seat numbers like N76 so that every time a news comes out that they publish for it, we can quickly find out. So now we know that, who's this? Yeah, so now we know that where Encore Ming is going to be running. Because Malaysia Kini already tagged GE14 and N76. So that's so this chat room is where we kind of collaborate all the time online, questions and so on. Like I might even integrate the Google thing for that, but then it gets really busy. For example, I get all the updates from Jen. She's one of the contributing right now. She's pretty much filled up all the information for DAP and PPR. Okay, so if you want to join this, if you have a website open, sorry, it's not so clear. Oh no, it's actually GE14. I know. Okay, just go to Senior Project website. It's not that clear, but there's a link there that says Slack, and that gives you an automatic invite to the channel. It's not a secret society, it's open. Yeah, we have a few MPs lurking in here. Ang Kiaming and Stephen Sim are here, but only if you post them. they're usually too busy to answer on. But so yeah, if you join in, so go to CNR Project website. You'll find a link to Slack. Let me see if I can actually make this big. Oops. We're just screening this to the world now. Okay, this is the link. It's kind of long. But you can also get it from the CNR Project website. Just look for this Slack. So one thing, the reason that we kind of keep the GE14 kind of semi-private is that, yeah, well, we don't want to have, for example, just before the election, somebody that we don't know come in and just wipe out the sheets, right? I'll try to make regular backups as well, but we're kind of trusting each other here, but we can't trust the wider public, right? Just in case. Because there's a ton of work already. I think Jen has spent probably the last 4 days like filling up all the DAP candidates. So if we just open up the link to anybody to the public, somebody will just go delete everything or random stuff. So so that's why the GE14 chat room and the links to this, we're kind of sharing it on a per name basis. So just ask and then we'll start sharing. Actually, after this, you can give me your email addresses for Gmail and then we can start sharing. So everybody okay for that? And in any case, afterwards we can share it later.
Question.
Yep.
So are we going to connect using Slack after this workshop?
Yeah. All of us will be in the GE14.
So that's where we update one of ourselves?
Yes. Like ask questions or do you know who this person is? We have a few reporters in there and some insiders. So sometimes because certain information you can only get it from WhatsApp. For example, let's say Sabah Sarawak, we have one person from Sabah, another person from Sarawak. Sometimes you won't find the information on a candidate, or you want to verify, for example, that this is the person. Then you just ask that question. I
would also like to ask about the verification because when you spoke about the UK, we're willing to share their information, but not in the Malaysian context. So once we get the information, how do we do the verification?
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go through that. Yeah, that's the other important thing. The data integrity of ours is really important because everybody's sharing and reusing our data, right? Okay, so that's the chat room where we're kind of chatting and asking any questions. But okay, so let me go back. So how do we do the sheets, right? So the easiest thing for crowdsourcing is Google Sheets because you don't need any technical skills or to just edit a spreadsheet, right? We do have the contributor Kay. She's in Melbourne right now. She actually writes the code that will synchronize all this information to the database in the backend. So we're kind of end users, including myself. And later on, she will actually sync. So I'm saying this now, like not to add details for the MPs yet, because that's actually, a lot of that is actually in our database. So when she runs the sync scripts, the spreadsheet will start filling. So I'll just share quickly why it's organized this way. Okay. The sheets are actually kind of a representation of the database. So it's actually a subset. And all the fields in the spreadsheets are actually matching an international standard. So for those of you who are developers or technical background, the international standard that we're using is called Popula Spec. not that interesting, but it's just a background on popular spec. So popular spec is where a whole bunch of us collaborate. So for example, Gov0, our friends in Taiwan, CNAR's there, Canadians, UK, Sunlight, which is our equivalent in the US. I think Granicus, some EU organizations. So we actually all collaborated to make this because we had to solve the same problems. So one good example is, you know how all the political parties are now running, opposition are running under PKR? The standard actually supports that. So our spreadsheet actually supports the fact that a person from DAP is running on behalf of PKR. So we were not the first person to have that problem. It happens in other elections. So popular spec is for those of you who are interested in why are the fields the way they are. So every politician, which I showed you, is also using the same standard. And the good thing is that all the problems that other people face has been solved before. So we're quite trustworthy. We're quite trusting of the standard because it's what the UK uses as well. So all the fields that we have are identical to it. So let me go back. So these things are kind of the subset. So let me go through on how we do the sheets. So there's two main folders, which we'll share later. How it works is this. You have the seat nominations, and then you have what we call the candidate sheets. The candidate sheets, I'll go through these first, is actually the hardest part. The candidate sheets are built by are separated out by party, and it's the sheets with all the information on all the basic information on all the candidates. I think PKR was quite completed, so I'll go through. So this is every time you see an announcement right now, we're adding it to this. Once the official one comes out 26, we'll add every other name to this list as well. So we're already filling it up, for example, on all the basic PKR. We're even tracking right now where they're likely going to be, for example. So Akmal Nasir, Johor Bahru Parliament seat. So coming back to the integrity part, what we're doing right now is for each of these fields. So you'll see, I'll go through very briefly before I go through that. There's some hints at the top. The MS is basically Bahasa. So we're going to try complete for Bahasa. We can actually support more languages, but for now we're going to concentrate on Bahasa first. And then English is there because some of us are familiar with working in English or the sources are English. But in future, we could actually add other languages as well to the columns to help translate. That's what we did for Myanmar. So MS is basically, is the Bahasa for now. So for example, this guy's Akmal Nasir. Other names can be like nicknames. So for example, Stephen Sim, his real name is Stephen Sim Kishong, but everybody calls him Stephen Sim. So in the other one, you just put Stephen Sim, right? Or S of Arul, I can't remember his name, but everybody knows him as Arul PSM, right? But so you can put that in the alternative names. But as far as possible, we use their names without honorifics and without the bin, because it's kind of the international standard. So for example, Dato Sri Najib Raza Haji Tun, whatever it is, right? We will just split it to the back. If you're in doubt, just go to Wikipedia. You'll notice that they're all using these basic names. And the reason for this is for technical reasons later, sorting and whatnot. Because otherwise, everybody will be sorted as D. That's not very helpful. So, and then if you want to have, and then there's others that are more specific. For example, for Chinese names, you can put their surnames if it's relevant. And for Malaysians, especially for Malay names and Indian names, we have what they call a patronymic name. So that's the anak lelaki, anak perempuan, bin, binti, and so on. So the, Najib bin Abdul Haji Raza, or whatever it is, that's where you put the full name here. It's mostly for completeness later for us to use. Honorifics as well, you can put it in. If somebody's a Tun Sri, Dato Sri, you can just put just Dato Sri in there. Optional. It's nice for completeness, but not needed. But patronymic name is something that we usually should do because this is for transparency later. I found out that the full complete name, when you try to match with contracts, is much more accurate programmatically. So anybody who does LB, what's it called again? Levenstein deviation or something? The more characters you have, the longer the name turns up and if the more likely the match is. Whereas Ahmad Abdullah, there's going to be like 10 matches and I can't know whether the contract is really him or not. Where if it's like Dato Abdullah bin Sri Aziz, that's a very specific name. So for anti-corruption purposes, that helps us do the matching much better. So it's people's thing. Okay, so this is the, then we have male, female. So in this case, the MS version will be just the lucky. We don't have any transgender candidates, I don't think so. But I mean, just put, this is just for gender or for whatever that you need. I think in Malaysia, everybody's lucky and perempuan. I think. But if it's other, yeah, you can. If there is an act, no, I don't think so, not for this election, but you never know. Okay, there's guideline contents on the summary. The summary is just a very, if you notice, if you do a Google search, right? For example, the summary is basically what we call the kind of the one-line description of the person. It's pretty basic. I have the content guidelines. So if you're in the chat room, so who's there? Long ways. So okay, so I'll invite you. So let's just invite. Yes, show channel history with all the other stuff. Join.
Here comes our secret. Run.
What? Not there. Oh no, it's join. Oops, invite. Can I do it multiple? No, I
But invite.
No. Okay, so I'm not sure if I've joined everybody in there yet. Evil, okay. So anyways, once you join in at the top, I actually have a kind of one link page to all the links and guides and that you need to know what to do, like the sheets and all the links. Including the link to the actual chat room. So you can, okay, so for content, I think I have a content guideline somewhere. Should make it better. So to keep it consistent, yeah, some of the things that I mentioned, first name, surname without honorifics, patronymic names and so on, I've already mentioned that. Other names. Dates, ideally, it should be okay in a spreadsheet because it'll auto-detect it. So sort of for one-line summary, it's pretty simple. You just put the full name of the person, what they generally are seen, businessmen, politician. I put some candidates. If you have any suggestions on how it can be improved, please let me know so we can adjust it. You know, is a researcher and whatnot. Most of these guys will be politicians. But so it's like, what are they most known for? And then what's their most current position, right? That is notable. So, for example, yeah, Najib is the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Nurul Izzah is the current MP. Another example is Tan Sri Ismail. It's a director, current chairman of media, pretty much. Or any other. Could be somebody, Nasir, who was, I think I had a good example for him. I think it's from the Tamir candidate for DAP. So here's that. So Fahmi Fazil is a Malaysian politician who is the communications director of YCP. Just like one line, right, on who they are. Sometimes that's all we can ever find out there, right? So that's actually a good start already. Then the next part is actually a brief biography. It's not a complete biography so basically just sentences about the person, the notable current and past positions, notable recognitions, either positive or negative. So we try to do it with following Wikipedia guidelines of neutral point of view. You don't say things like Nurul Izzah is a brilliant something unless she's actually a winner, or she's extremely nice person. Those are all not, those are all things. However, you can say she is a person. Okay, for example, you don't put Nurul Izzah is a really nice, passionate person who solves the poor people in helps the poor people. That's not the point. You just put there Nurul Izzah runs programs in support of poor people in PPR flats. That's it. You don't judge on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Same thing with a corruption case, for example. You don't say Najib Razak is an evil person who stole billions. You just say he has been cited as reported as, in scandals involving one MBB. That's a neutral point of view. Oh crap, this is live.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the short biography, if let's say a politician is also like the chairman of a company, like Syahir Samad, he is an MP and chairman of Felda. Yeah. So does that come in the short biography?
Yeah, you can do that.
What do you prioritize?
I think my call on that is basically the most common names, right? So Isa Samad will be like former Felda. So you can possibly put two positions in there if it helps with understanding who that person is, right? So for example, sometimes Isa Samad, you probably should put Felda in there because then that reminds you of who he is. But if you just put there Isa Samad is a politician, that doesn't really convey who he actually is, right? So I think that's a judgment call, but you try not to put every position in there. So like I said, notable. And then in the biography, then you can put all the other notable things in there. Not too long. I'm trying to keep it. I'm kind of following the Wikipedia guidelines as a rough guide. Current and past positions, notable ones, and then maybe one or two key things about them that are public knowledge. If you go on Wikipedia, you can kind of have an example of how they do this. Again, don't worry about being too perfect on this. It's always the best case possible. So even I get, sometimes I go back and say, okay, this is probably not right, or probably should be removed. Somebody criticized me on Najib. I said widely reported. He says, no, you should just say reported, right? So yeah, just try your best for this. So here, for example, Najib Razak. This is actually similar to Wikipedia. Current finance minister, president of UMNO. What kind of is he known for? He pursues liberation policies. And then after elected, some other notable things about him, right? But in this case, sedation charges, things that he's known for, and maybe one MBB. And you just put that as a matter of fact. If it's cited somewhere as in use, you don't judge for it or anything like that. So yeah, I know politicians, so don't copy and paste the politicians' CVs because they just make themselves look like saints. So you just take out all of that and put it in. Okay, so how do we know citations? Our website database actually is able to have a citation on every single field, so that when somebody looks at the database, we can actually find out where did we get the information, right? So I'll just give an example first. What MDB of how I used it, because I got in trouble with this. Not really in trouble, but a journalist could not use this database source because I didn't have the citations for the things. So they actually have spent extra work to verify every point that I made, right? So same thing, 5 of us are doing it. If we don't add the citations, then somebody has to go find every one of those to verify it. So it makes it harder. So in this case, for example, in our database, this is for the I actually, so for example, I said, okay, who in the DOJ document, it said the CEO, they didn't mention the name, was from this date and this date, right? So in our database, I actually had the start and end dates for the 1MDB CEO. And for each one, I actually had citations, for example, from their main website and so on. So when I pulled that information out, I actually had a link to the original source. In this case, the 1MDB, his personal LinkedIn page, Malaysia Kini, and I think the other one was also from the 1MDB press release. So the information had citations for each one. How do we do this in a spreadsheet? Every field in which you have information, just leave a comment. So in this case, that's good. I think Ian has been pretty good at this. So for example, in this case, I put this detail. I actually put the original source, which is his official webpage, right? If you find other information, commenting is really easy because you just go to the sheet and you can add your own comments there. I found something else here as well. So later on, I need to talk with Kay. We would probably then import those sources for that field. So that when somebody uses database, they can pull out every one of the source. But for now, for our purposes, it's just in each field, if you find some information, put the link on there. And then people can discuss. Sometimes we can find better resources later. Avoid, of course, blogs and all that. Social media is pretty horrible, unless it's from their official, accounts. But generally, news, for me right now, the Star and so on are probably our best sources for all these news, as well as their official websites if they have any. But official websites will be quite limited. Even if you go to Wikipedia, be careful, check, because quite often on Wikipedia, the citations are not there. So you can't just copy and paste from Wikipedia because quite a lot of the politicians don't have citations. So you can't really verify whether that really happened or not. So if you do find an entry in Wikipedia, check the citations and then copy and paste that citation. Don't put Wikipedia as a citation for that information. I found that a lot of Malaysian politicians, they just have stubs with a few paragraphs, no citation whatsoever. It's totally not dependable. So people are going to be depending on our information, so we have to be a bit responsible for it. So generally, so if you notice here, official, Ricardo Yampi, their comment on that, yeah, so Ricardo Yampi, so Jen, she put in Senior Harian, for example, to get some information on that. So they're all over the place, news articles, sometimes from others, but just put the citations in there. So that answers your question on. So generally be responsible, just use news. Don't use random blogs. Use news, official. Right now the easiest thing is that all of the announcements are quite official news. DAP announces this, but sometimes not. Sometimes you just have to find in Senior Harian sometimes, especially for the rural zones. Really hard to find information. The best sometimes you find is that there was one where the only notable information, I had a discussion with this, the only notable information was that he yelled at some politician, and that's the only information online that we could find for this person. What was it? Was it DAP? I think it's a DAP candidate. I'll just give you, it's a funny example, but it's a real one. And this is a kind of sad reality. Yeah. We actually, my area, who's from Kelanajaya, we elected Wong Chen, but the MP before that was a guy called Boiler Byrne, and that was my first time voting. The only notable thing about him was that he was the guy who took the picture of some judge scandal video. That's it. So people like me voted for him, and his only notable thing was that he did the recording of the VK Lingam case, and that was it. So sadly, so for example, I think it's Chow Yi Hao, I think. So it's like, yeah, this is this is Chung Yok Thong from DAP, right? So the only notable thing that Yen could find was that he suggested the removal of past representatives, and that's the only notable thing that we can find about him online. So sadly for Malaysia, so this is the kind of problems that we have with our representatives. If you can find any other sources, or in our case, if you know them, just call them or ask DAP to give a better thing. But it's sad that that's the only thing we know about him. We don't even know if he was a lawyer or an economist or whatever. The only thing that we found online on him was that. Okay. And what does he do?
Before you have this.
But not really sure, right? But he's our elected representative. We don't know what he does. So the only thing was we know him for is that he did some controversial statements in the Islamic Assembly. That's all. That's the only notable thing. So this is good because now we can, when we build a candidate website, people now know, like, you know, people will start asking questions from him, like, who, if I'm going to vote for you, is that the only thing that you ever do? So maybe then they will publish something better. But as of now, that's all we've got. So sad as it is.
But then when you're researching, sometimes you'll be collecting many more information before you sort of, distill it down to here. Do we have like a site sheet, a site sheet that we put in to put it on it?
Yeah, for now, it's for each sheet. It's a running conversation, right? So that's why I said for this one, I think I had a running conversation with Yen. Right, so she put this, Malaysia Kini. I said, you know, wouldn't it be better that as a secondary? Is there any? She's like, yeah, but I can't find, right? So use the sheets as a discussion on that, and then we will add the links. So it could be that both of you two people possibly could have different ideas on something. Or in my case, I said, really? And then, or other times I would find another source and I said, look, I think this is a better source than the one that you found on Wikipedia. So everybody got that? Right, yes. So if you put stuff in the fields, except for the lucky prompt, you can kind of guess that one, I hope. But other than that, make sure that you have the original source. If there's if there's none, just leave it as empty, because that's safer. And that's how we work. We always work on this is the best that we know. If we don't know, we just leave it as empty. And if the candidate website or people build other apps show it as empty, too bad. That's on the politicians to give us the information, right? So don't pressure yourself if you don't find anything. It's okay. This is the best that we can do. Yeah.
On the link, should we create an archive.org link immediately?
Ideally, you could there, but some of them might be blocked. Okay, so what Michael did was this. This is a whole separate project. How much time do we have? This is archiving. For those of you who are not familiar, if you do research, quite often in Malaysia, things disappear. Especially, let's just say there's a controversial item on a politician or something on his website. A week later, it will be removed, right? So what Michael was saying is, one thing that I often use is I use the Internet Archive. So you can actually have a little extension in Firefox or Chrome. And what it does is that it keeps a snapshot, a copy, an archive copy that people can look for. So let's go give an example. 38p, right? So this is Malay Online. You never know, Malay Online might suddenly be blocked just before the elections, or it could be like the Malaysian Insider. I lost so much information from Malaysian Insider. So let's open this link. Okay. So maybe this thing gets taken off or changed, right? So one safer way to do it is you can have an extension. No, Malay Mail, I don't want to know. You can get an extension called the Internet Archive. So this is one click, but I will actually show Wayback Machine. Wayback Burger. So in this Wayback Machine, you can simply paste the link. Maybe not this one. And I'll paste the link here, and it'll keep an archive of that page. And it's better to save this copy of the link because this will always exist, especially if it's a controversial thing. So I'm saving it, and it also saves it on that specific day as well. So for 1MDB, for example, I actually took, not just me, a whole bunch of other, we took the statements as it went day by day because it changed day by day. it's also a useful tool for government announcements. It's like sometimes they just change it within the same day if you've seen some of them. So yeah. So in this case, you could actually keep this copy of the web archive. So let me go back to that candidate again. And I say web archive. So this link will always exist even if MMO goes out of business, or and I think MMO is going to change to the Malay mail, so that link might not work anymore. So if you have a online archive, it's easier. For those of you not familiar with Chrome, you can actually just look for an extension. So in my case, I just click, it's like one click and it automatically saves it for me. So that's Internet Archive. We are archiving YouTube videos right now for all the others. But that's a separate thing. I've already started downloading all the VN ones. But that's a separate project to this one. We're trying, especially the YouTube videos that they're going to be ashamed of later after the elections. We're going to archive them all. Okay, so back again. So this is actually, and it's by party. So the personal details are by party, and the reason for this is that later on we're going to import all of them automatically to be members of DAP or members of Amanah at this time. So the sheets that we will mostly be working with is the GE14 candidate sheets, and we just go by party. So every time you see an announcement or something, your webcam probably none. No, VN's not going to have any. Like Garcon probably has like what, 2. Okay, pass. So yeah, DAP for example. So this is where you probably start doing it. I know some of you are busy. That's also okay. So for example, somebody like me, I don't have that much time to do profile summaries. If you don't have time, fine. Just sometimes if you find information, just add a comment first. Right? And then maybe somebody else can see that comment and quickly copy edit. Let's say you're not a good copy editor, right, to make a bio. So let's just say, for example, this person, Jimmy Wong. Actually, I'm not sure if I can even find any information on this guy. Anybody know him? No?
It's a generic name.
No, he's a politician, okay? So in this case, this is an MP, so we probably have some information on him. So in this case, I don't have that much time, but I could quickly find him on the Twitter page. I can quickly for DAP, I can say that. Okay. Defending seat. And then maybe later somebody else can help fill it in if you don't have time. So just do whatever you can on the best case effort. So even if you don't have time and you just put in the links, that's fine, because later on maybe somebody like me will just go through the links and just fill in the bios because you've already found the links for me. Okay. Another help would be to actually translate this. Zeeming help me out. Translate to Bahasa, right? So if English is the most, I'm more comfortable with English. Then I would probably do a bio in English. Then somebody who can translate better in Bahasa can quickly do. So who can help? Chong Eng adalah seorang ahli politik yang bekas. I'm not sure if that's your grammar correct. Bekas adun ada. So of course somebody who's got better BM can translate. So yeah, either way. So somebody who's more familiar with BM, you put the BM first, and then we can translate later. Or even if you find a BM link, let's say in Senior Higher, just copy the link first, and then somebody can help translate into the or do the bio for Bahasa. So yeah. So everybody got that. So this is a lot of work. My advice for this week, at least, just do it for the don'ts first. The Dewan Negeri, because for most of the MPs we have quite a lot of information on the go. Later on, our friend Kay this is all synced to the database, and for the MPs, it's all going to be autofilled. So it's when you add this, we're going to sync it to the database, and then any information from the database goes back into the spreadsheet. So, but for the DON right now, I can tell you we have pretty much zero for most zero data. We know that they're DON, and that's about it. No profile, no, not even gender, birth dates, and so on. We don't have that. For most of them, we won't have. So we'll just try our best. And also, because it's kind of volunteer, pick the ones that you like doing, right? So I mean, so for example, if you are in Selangor, for example, and you have an interest, it's a lot more fun to do it for Selangor because it makes a difference for you, right? But if you're not familiar with Terengganu, then it's not going to be much fun because you can't verify it, you don't have any friends in Terengganu to verify. So yeah, just do what you can on the things that are of interest to you. And that's it. We will never get it complete for sure. We can only do the best that we've got. And then we will, hopefully some of you will continue onwards afterwards, where we keep on improving as we see along. The goal for this is that after the candidate website, we will shift all of that to actually have the candidate website. Not candidate, a representative website, right? So right now we don't have, other than Undi Malaysia, MyMP, we don't have any candidate website like they work for you. We don't have any for the DUNs, other than official ones. For some DUNs like Perak, they don't even have an official state assembly website, so I can't even get their pictures. Perak does not have a state assembly website. That's how bad we have, right? So you can confirm that, right? I'm pretty sure. There's a state assembly with no state assembly website, so you can't download legislature, you can't get information on your reps in Perak because they never bothered to build a public website. Selangor is easiest because Selangor actually has all the details.
But they don't normally function for long.
Yeah.
Even the NDI page change all the time.
Okay.
But sometimes they just break.
So that's why I'm saying we can't. Selangor and Penang would probably be the most complete because you can find every information on the Selangor DUN online, their emails and everything. But for Perak, you won't. For Terengganu, you may. I haven't looked into it yet. So yeah, so just do the best that you can. And then sometimes this is like for journalists, right? Sometimes we work on our stories, you just update the ones that are interesting for your stories. You don't do the other stuff because you don't have time. Yeah.
Are there connections in the database to judicial database?
Not yet. So that's why I said we're building this database first because we don't have the names yet. Okay. Once we have the names, then the next step comes up. It's like, do we have the judiciary database? Right? The parliamentary documents, for example, we learned there's no parliamentary documents. So the next step was that, okay, let's make the parliamentary documents online. Then the next step comes as, can we join them? So it's like bit by bit. So for us, the names is a good basis first. Same with the judiciary. I have the list, but I haven't imported it yet. Ideally, we should import all the senior public officials' names so that we can also link to them to what cases that they're in and were they the presiding judges over these politicians. But that's a little bit later. So our database stores more than that, not just the elected candidates. If they hold a position in a GLC in future, we can also add that into the database later, not yet now. So for example, Isa Samad, we actually have his posts, all his memberships in other, do I have it? I'm pretty sure I have it for Nur Jaslan. So Nur Jaslan, for example, I have all his connections in TH, Tabung Haji Resources and whatnot. So those are also in there. So it's a continuing database. Yeah.
So
yeah.
all these data is sent to the database.
Yeah.
And the API
will
read from that database.
Yeah, we'll read from that database. Yeah.
Can you do write from there?
Yes. But you'll have to talk to Ziming because not Ziming, Swimming.
The short answer is I don't easily give access to.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, we do have write access to the database if you need to, and there's some specific things. For example, let's say you want to do an import script or something like that. We do have write database. Or the other one that we're working on was an editor. So if you could build a better editor than the current one, sorry, streaming.
I was wondering
Yeah.
if we could do something like that. We have a report on GitHub.
Yeah.
So everyone contributes and they have this do a commit.
Yeah.
So we all sync through APIs and then
Yeah.
Some script for that already.
Yeah.
In our hard disk somewhere.
Yeah. So if you have ideas like that, okay. So here's an example, right? Judiciary, right? So judiciary is, you can go to kahaikiman.gov.my and it has all the judges in public, but it's not script. Let's say you could actually have that as a CSV on GitHub or something like that. Then you could write a script and where we could actually import all the judges. Yeah. And then we can search them on ICIJ and see how many offshore accounts they have. But yeah, so yeah, we do have access if you know what you're doing. So there, you're already on our Slack channel, right? So we actually have a dev channel that we talk about building scripts and whatnot. So Kay, for example, wrote the scripts to synchronize the thing because she has the token for it. Yeah. The only reason that we don't do it so much is like, yeah, this is going to be the main database for the candidate. So if we have done screw ups before, it's like oops, and we do have daily backups on the API, but yeah, you understand, right? Why? Yeah, but it's okay. If you have ideas like that, just talk to us on that, and then we can give you the token for write access. Yeah, it gets updated whenever somebody needs to work on it. Right? So for example, okay, let's say this is a GE14. Right now, there's going to be a whole bunch of updates, right? But sometimes, like I said to you before, sometimes, let's say after the elections, people are not that interested anymore. But maybe Empower is doing a project on women MPs. So now they're collecting data, then that's going to be another update, but just on the women MPs. So that part will be updated.
There are also sometimes update by case because they say certain MP is involved in some big scandal.
Yeah.
We update this as
Then
well.
we're going to start mapping out that MP.
We mostly concentrate on companies.
Yeah. So yeah. So our hope is that how often is it? It's depending on how many of you guys contribute. Yeah.
It's not on a periodic basis.
No, because there's so much stuff in there. For example, I can't disclose what I put in there, but if you search, because so for example, I'm chasing a whole bunch of people doing offshore transfers, right? Their names are on there, like Malaysian High Commission names and whatnot. But so it's being updated regularly, but it's just a small portion of the database. So it just depends on who's contributing. So. And it's the same thing. Sometimes, let's say after this one, Malaysia Kini would have all the nominates. They sometimes share the data. We're going to do a bulk update of a whole bunch of information, maybe on political parties and so on. So yeah, it's on a per project basis. But because it's collaborative, it's the best that we've got at any one time. So okay, so this is where we put in all the information. I think this is the bulk of the work because my hope is that if we could get even some of the duns complete, like Selangor or Penang, that's already a win. We had 0 before right now, right? We have 0 before. So even if we get 4 or 5 duns, that's 5 duns with basic information that we did not have before. So now we can actually do, for example, Perak if we finish this. So yeah. So we're going from, except for the MPs, we're going from nothing to something. So anything's better than what we had before. Okay, so this is the candidate. So how do we put them in the nominees? This one is actually the easier part. We probably don't have to do this, but if some of you want to help later, it's by Dun, and all we have to do is actually put the names down and what they're on behalf. So let's pick Selangor. More familiar with that. I haven't put, so these are all the seats. So it's a slightly different sheet because it's their membership, or it's not their personal details. So it's relatively easy. For example, I don't know who's ready for Subanjaya. Do I have anybody in here? Subanjaya, anybody know? Yeah. It's
Rasa.
Nope. Oh no, Subang.
It got really.
I don't think Subang. Okay, but I'm just gonna put it as an example and just delete it later, right? Because our names are already in the other sheets, the only thing that we need to do for nominees is basically put the name for Semenye, maybe let's say Arul on PSM. And on behalf of Party Socialist Malaysia. And that's all we have to do.
So there will be multiple.
Yeah, so there'll be multiple. So if there's 2 candidates, we basically cut and paste it and insert a new row. And then it will be, I don't know, Abu from Arisan Nation. Okay, and that's all we need to do, because all the other entries, because once we sync it, all their personal details will be pulled in from the other sheet.
What was ID?
Don't have to, because this is going to be the official EC. Right. Yeah, because right now we're putting notes on where they might be, but in the end the ECs. So this is not such a big deal, because on April 26th we will have the whole list. So all we basically do is just enter the names. What's bad, the reason I said the other one is important, is that we will know the names, but do we know who they are? And that's all those other sheets. So yeah, this is not going to be so important. Oh, okay. If we don't have the other information on the other ones, we can't do, for example, know what's the breakdown of gender for candidates. If we don't have the information on all the other candidates that in those other sheets, or it'll be incomplete. So yeah, so like I said, this one's not going to be too bad. If somebody wants to help out on this, but I have a feeling that we could possibly just automate this as well. If we have all the EC and the names, which in theory, I think we have some volunteers who would just write the script to just, match the names against the thing. It's not a difficult thing to do. Interestingly, what I found interesting is that sometimes the names are not consistent. Najib Razak has run under 3 different names. Who does that? So in theory, that should be illegal. How can you run on an election ticket with a name different from your IC? But apparently the EC accepts nomination candidates, so sometimes you'll see that the names change from year to year. But let's not worry about that. That's actually in the database. So, okay, so that's the basic thing, and that's all. But all I can say is that once it's in there, it's so useful, right? I'll just give an example of K's notebook, right? So this is an intern. Once it's in the database, things like getting the latest contact list of women MPs is immediate. You don't have to do any research whatsoever, because it's just pulling it from the database. So don't worry about the code, but the code is a one-time thing. So right now, at any time, if you ask us the contact list, we can just basically give it to you immediately. Because it's just, you don't have to go search and go through editing, it'll just pull it from the database, right? Or you can do stats like this. Yeah, so what's the percentage of women in MPs? Because we have the complete stats for the MPs, it's an immediate number. You don't have to go through the list of 222 MPs as a researcher. If the MPs are updated and changed, we just run the same script again, and you always have the latest information at any time. So that makes it really fast for you to do certain things. Especially if you're now, everybody kind of wants news now, right? So if you're gonna write, for example, a gender breakdown story or update 1 day after the nomination, unless you're not gonna have time to spend 3 days going through 1,000 candidates, right? But with this database, we'll be able to do that sort of things immediately. So here's an example that she did. You can actually see, for example, which party actually has the ratio of the most women MPs. I think I did one for Myanmar with exactly the same thing. And the cool thing with international standards is I can actually cut and paste this into the Malaysian one, and because it's exactly the same data. you can reuse your code. So anything that you do for Malaysia, you can do it for every politician, then you can do it for Myanmar. So for example, for this example test, so in Myanmar, for example, they have ethnicity. So it's pretty small, but you could basically do a breakdown. For example, how many, a good question would be like, how many Rohingya members or people from Rakhine are in the parliamentary, are in the Myanmar parliamentary. I could actually pull that immediately from the data from them. And for example, I could actually see that the gender breakdown by each party. This is something that we can actually do for Malaysia as well. I just didn't run the script for Malaysia. So we could actually tell, for example, that so women MPs as a total doesn't make any difference if the ratio is small. So the main party actually doesn't have too bad. But you realize that the others actually don't have the representation as a percentage of the party is actually really small. So you can do this kind of statistics live. And all our work now is going to save some poor researcher a lot of time. And then you can build websites like campaigns and whatnot. So how would the Malaysian candidate website look like? I'm just doing this very quickly. And if you're a developer and you want to do your own, it's okay as well. I'll probably have it in, I was just asking for a mock-up. So basically all the pictures, links, and so on that we're going to do is just going to be pulled up into a candidate website. So every time you go to a DUN, the picture, the one-line summary, the Twitter links, and so on will all be shown. Then their biography comes in. Their contact details will come up, will all be automatically shown on the candidate webpage. So the ones that, and then for example, the CV is something that ideally they should provide online. Then you'll be able to just upload their CV. This is a separate thing from the spreadsheets. But since you're all in the chat room, I can actually guide you through it. It's not difficult. And since we can actually generate the tweets, because we actually have their tweet in the database. So I actually had a script, if you look at Undi Malaysia. So I actually had a list of all the MP tweet accounts that I extracted from the database. And then using the Twitter API, I actually have all the tweets of the MPs ongoing. If I browse, I think Namawi actually tweets as well. He tweets? Yeah, he does. So in this case, it's easy to just build all these websites because the data is already there. If he doesn't have a Twitter, then we don't have a Twitter feed. Again, all his website, his email, it's all taken in from the website. I mean, from the database itself. So what we're going to have is, it's going to be something like this. So every time, all you have to do is search for Subang Jaya and you'll get all the link candidates that we have and the information that we have right now. So right now for Subang, I might not have the candidate profiles yet, so it'll just be little shadow pictures and whatnot. So if we do have the information, then there'll be a picture for that person. If we have a bio, we'll have the bio. And I don't think anybody else is doing as complete a level of this, so this is the best that we've had for ever. So I think Google will also be pulling from our data set as well. I'll talk to Zara on that. So if Google wants to do some info, they're actually probably likely going to use our data as well. Not Zara, Jeffrey.
All these images, when we upload to e-commerce, we put it to a centralized area?
It's just a URL on there. So sometimes, this is a really hard one to get. It's really hard to get public images of our politicians. And by public, I mean pictures that are usable by everybody, not stuff that you take from the newspaper, because that's copyrighted. So the ideal picture is if you can collect it somewhere. Ideally, you should upload it to Wiki Commons and link it, because if it's on Wiki Commons or on Flickr, then the licensing will be free to use. So that means if you build your app or whatever, there's no copyright issues with it because it's licensed freely to use. So for example, in Wiki Commons,
Free as in freedom.
yes. So for example, if you want to look for this is my photo, but let's just say Najib. So Najib Raza. These are the photos that we can use because it's freely accessible. So if I click on this one, Najib Raza, for example. Generally, it's safe to also link to pictures from official government websites because that's also public domain. So in this case, for Najib Raza, I think I use this one just in the spreadsheets. I use it, but let's just say it's for Facebook, contact Twitter, national identity, image. You would just have that image of him, ideally a portrait picture. Try to look for it in Wiki Commons. If not, ask for them and then upload it to Wiki Commons. I did that for PSM. I said, I can't use the picture that you put on Twitter, right? There's no licensing. Did you give me permission to use it or so on? So I asked PSM, give me permission. And as a result, I'm gonna delete this. As a result, on Wiki Commons, what's his name? The PSM youth. Raja, like that? Raja. Sivarajan. Yeah, so now I actually have his, I think it's, okay, they already approved it already. So in this case, I asked them for permission. Now this photo is publicly usable for everybody else. So if you look at it here, it says, yeah, the licensing for it is you're free to share, distribute, remix, use whatsoever. So the sad part is that most of our politicians, one is that they don't even have a photo. Good luck trying to find the photos of some of them. The second is that if there is a photo, it's all probably from a news site in which we cannot put it on our database because that we don't have the copyright reuse for that. So the next best thing is usually government. That's why we have all the pictures of MP. Government websites are legal for us to use because that's the official public photo of them. Third best thing is the candidate webpage, right? Ideally, we should ask for them, but since they're the candidate, they're probably more than happy to have their picture online. But it's still not ideal. But that's it. Every other photo that we put in, if it's from a newspaper, we probably not. It's not a good thing because we probably don't have permissions to reuse it, and it means we don't have permissions for everybody else to use it as well. So that's a licensing issue on the image. So yeah, another good thing to get is ask those MPs if we can put it on Wiki Commons. It's sad, right? So for example, let's go. This is how a pretty sad thing. Let's say Ong Kiang Ming. So you would think this guy's pretty popular and whatnot, right? Because everybody knows him. He goes online. He talks to everybody else. But if you go to his Wikipedia webpage, the photo that he has is my photo from a session because that's the only publicly available photo there is. So even his Wikipedia page does not have a nicer picture because there's no publicly licensed image of him to be used, which is pretty sad. I'll put a better picture of him later because I have his photo. But you'll see another one example is like Rafizi. Yeah.
It's a quick question, right?
Yeah.
Regards to copyright, the person that you're taking a picture of must consent to that picture being taken first.
No, not in Malaysia. We don't have privacy laws in Malaysia.
So the photographer always holds the right.
Yeah. Except, and I think this is following international laws, unless you use that photo to endorse a product.
Okay, that's fair.
That's a use of their image. But if it's just their picture, in Malaysia we have no privacy laws.
Okay.
So unless it's indecent or harassment, you can spy and take photos of anybody in Malaysia. There's no privacy laws. It's
There
horrible.
are private freelance photographers who have like photos of.
Yeah, if they want to share, that would be brilliant, and it's actually a good thing because they'll have photo credit on it. So it's actually I actually try to recommend more and more of that, right? So
just release it at a pretty common.
yeah, and you on Flickr, for example, right? And they don't have to release everything. Maybe just that portrait, right? And the interesting thing here for them is that a lot of especially the less known case, nobody has pictures of them. Right. So even the media people have to, if they don't have a file picture of it, then that will be the photo that everybody uses, right? And that's a pretty good exposure for a photographer. So yeah, I would encourage, or even the public, if you're going to a ceramah, even if it's a fuzzy photo, that's better. Then it puts pressure on the candidate. Like, look, just give us your photo that's publicly available if you want to have a nicer photo than the blurry mobile photo at a ceramah at night, right? So yeah. So on the copyrights for that, you just have to put the link to the image. So best one is the Wiki Commons. Encourage all of them to upload, or Flickr. Flickr also has an option to put a Creative Commons license. Second best option is a government website. Like Parliament website, DUN website, or something that's official. The third one that you probably can link off, but it's not going to be very permanent, is their candidate thing. So all the, for sure, BAP and so on, even Barisan Nasional will have nice professional pages where you can get their photos from, right? That's the third option. It's not that great, but it's the best one that we've got. Because those photos might actually disappear in a while, because it's just a candidate photo. Right? And then if there's no publicly available usable photo, don't steal it from some other photo. Just leave it blank. Because on the candidate website, they'll just have a blank portrait. So then that puts pressure on the candidate. Because now you got a nice picture of Ong Kian Ming, and then the other person is a blank photo, right? So that ideally, I'm not sure how much the impact was, but I think people will start getting pressure on it. So, Taki, sorry, 11:40. So there's one more difference. So any questions on the data? It's pretty straightforward, right? We're just collecting spreadsheets on the spreadsheet. Any questions as well, you can ask on the chat. It's a collaborative effort. I don't know what I'm doing either. I mean, the standards are correct, but sometimes on the biography, right, nobody really knows what the right thing is to do. So sometimes it's good to just ask another person. Like the bio, sometimes I write the bio and somebody says, no, you shouldn't put that word in or something. So it's a collaborative effort. Okay, so everybody kind of got that on the spreadsheets? It's straightforward, right? Yeah.
I just want to clarify, so for the spreadsheet,
yeah.
We are just supposed to go on Google or whatever.
Yeah, and Google, but sometimes you can have other sources. I know for the rural areas, sometimes the only way you can possibly get it is from a WhatsApp information or something like that. So yeah. So if you do get it, let's say a picture or something from WhatsApp or information, then that's kind of, I think that's also to put it, but just put it in there, got from WhatsApp, from somebody trustworthy. I mean, we kind of have to depend on trust on here, right? For the rural areas, for sure, you'd know that information from your uncle's friend or something like that, and that, depending on how much you trust that information. If you think that is something that you know, and that's your friend, and that's his real uncle, then put it up. Yeah, sometimes for rural, that's the best that we've got. I suspect that a lot of information will be on WhatsApp, but it's hard to verify, so you'll have to make a judgment call. That's why we were asking if anybody has local contacts with this. For example, Ziming's from Penang and Kedah, right? So she knows who to. What? Ipoh, right? So if you're from Ipoh and you're from a specific town, you will have some rough idea, you'll know the parent of that person or a schoolmate friend or something. But that's the best that we can do for that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it will be really nice if we can get as much information by, as much information as can by before the election, right? May 9th, right? So what I suspect is that from 20, so right now we're kind of pre-filling it as best as we possibly can. Then on the 28th, 26th, it's going to be the official nomination, right? And I suspect that from 28th for the 11 days, there's going to be a flurry of news and so on. So that's probably the best time to get it. But the expectation is that we're never going to get it complete. So we just do the best that we can. So ideally, it'll be on the May 9th. But even after the elections, we should still keep collecting the information because some of these people will be our elected candidates. And some of them, for sure, from past experience, they will be elected and they will still be empty, right? So it's an ongoing work to keep chasing them. Because if once they're an elected rep and we have no data from them, we really should try to go find out what their contact number is for the public, right? So yeah, ideally we should have everything by 9th, but it's an ongoing project all the time. So if we don't have it complete, that's fine. I'm fully expecting that for places like Sabah Sarawak, a whole lot of them will be quite empty. We won't even get a picture for many of them. But the urban one looks to be different. So yeah, that's the expectation. There's no expectation that we're going to complete any of this. The only one probably would be MPs. We will probably complete that. Selangor will probably be complete. Johor for sure will be complete. I think places like Penang, Perak will also be complete. Maybe Sabah, I'm not sure. But for a lot of them, Kelantan, Terengganu, if we're lucky, we can maybe get 20% of them. But even then, don't be too disheartened because that's 20% from zero. We don't have any from before, right? So yeah. Okay, so that's it on the thing. So it's just an ongoing thing on chat. As you can see, for example, yeah, Yen, I think she used to be working under Wang Chen. She's just gone ahead and just filled out a whole bunch of them already. That's the best I filled up on Macedon. So if everybody does a little bit, that's going to be quite okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Under the GIAS membership coalition, we were talking about creating like categories or the 5-point agenda. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So what's the update on that?
I mean, if you want to do that, that would be on the main website.
Okay.
So, do I have the website running? Hopefully I do. Hold on. This is not the data part, this is on the candidate website where some of this information will be fed into. Do I have it? So he's asking is, can we add additional criteria? So some of you might have read that I actually have a blacklist criteria for the candidates. So I'll go through that shortly. It's like an add-on to this. 14. So this is from the previous experience. It's not secretive. Sulin always writes weird stuff. Okay. So one of the problems that we had before was that the candidates just would not give their CVs, right? They just would not publish. You asked for them and they just wouldn't do it. And the other problem was that we had dodgy candidates, right? Isa Samad is running again. So, you'd have random people. Shahrizad's still thinking about running, right? So the problem is that, especially the Don people, you cannot remember anymore. Were they or were they not, right? So, like the Abdul Latif guy, I remember him. But if it's just a list of hundreds of candidates, how many of you still remember that MACC actually arrested him? You probably can't remember. Same thing with Six's comment zone. So, for the candidate website, what I did was that I said that if they don't publish their CV online, they will get blacklisted, right? So there's going to be a little mark on them saying blacklisted in the markups. If they are implicated in some sort of corruption case or gross mismanagement, they will add it to a blacklist. So there'll be a little mark to them. If they make any kind of hate speech comments, for example, there's a couple of them, racist comments, threats of violence, sexual harassment, and so on in public. And there will be more as the ceramah comes out. I will add a blacklist to them. So what he's asking is that C4 has a pledge. How can we show that whether they're going to, which candidates have actually pledged and whatnot? So to answer for that is that, well, basically I just add a little category for you, right? So here's an example of the actual website. So you can actually see it's quite detailed on exactly what corruption is and so on. So for example, even sexual harassment, I'm using Article 19. So say somebody is like a beauty queen. Being sexist is not hate speech, right? That just makes you an asshole. But if you threaten somebody, like, you know, a rape threat or something like that, that is hate speech, right? And then if somebody does that in a campaign or something, then I will put a blacklisting, and you'll be able to, on the website, not on the data, to actually add that information in so that we know. I think I had so an example like this is that what it will look for is that they'll get a nice little badge that says blacklisted. And if they fail any criteria, we'll actually have a count and a link, for example. Okay, so in this case, blacklisted why sexual harassment, right? And then if you click on the details, you'll be able to have the details. So this is separate from the spreadsheet. If you're interested in helping out, that'll be cool.
Well, you can add your own person interested.
Yeah. So
based on the criteria, just add it on the spreadsheet, another spreadsheet, tell it to us, or can be a Google document that we do later. Something that we add. Okay. You can collect this if you're interested.
We still need to kind of like brainstorm exact categories besides.
Yeah, I mean, my thing is keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
It's like yes or no, right? Yeah. Did you pledge or did you not? Then you can have a little checkbox and it's like pledge, and I can add a little badge, right? Like a green badge or something. So, oops. So I was just testing, for example, I think neural is that. So this is an example. I just wrote this in like an hour or something. So this is actually being pulled from the database. So if I change anything in the sheets and it's synced, this is also updated as well, right? So what he's asking is like, okay, how can I add my own? So in this case for Neural ISA, I actually had something like a blacklist violation. And then you're able to add additional information into it. And then that will show up on the candidate website. Yeah. So in your case, it's like, what do you want to add to it? Right? So in my case, for example, blacklist criteria, I actually have it drop down. Say gross management, sexual harassment, hate speech, racist, violent, threats at, I don't know, Bukit Beruntung, ceramah. Okay. Some summary there, and then possibly the link, you know, or source of the video or something like that. Take this. So now this guy, so Neural ISA now, at least in my database, will be making racist threats at Bukit Beruntung, right? Why, I don't know. But so this is on the actual candidate website itself. So your data will help fill in the basic information. But on at least the CNAR project candidate website, we will add this blacklist criteria so that when people make a choice, they will know, oh, this person was involved in corruption with a citation. So this is like a bonus. And the idea for this is that even if they're elected, we will keep adding this. So even after they're elected, they would still be a blacklisted politician for things that they did after they're elected. But this is just the CNAR project candidate website. If you're a developer, like I said, if you want to make your own candidate website from this, it's also okay. Maybe you're an environment thing and you want to make a list of MPs with just environment things and then profile them. You can pull this from this information. Is that clear? So yeah, you got it. So basically, give me that, okay. And then I can add this. So for example, C4 can immediately help with corruption.
Yeah.
So if you, for example, if Neural ISA is involved, I don't know what she's involved in for corruption, then I can give you access so that when it comes in.
Okay. Yeah. So right now my main problem I think is like because of incoming, but on time, like I'm not clear with the data stack structure. Chapter?
Okay. It's
so you put your Google.
Okay. The Google Forms, all this is basic information. Their bio, their images, their so on. So that's what everybody's working on. Everything else like this is on top of that basic information. So the blacklist violation is something that that's foreseen on our website.
Yeah.
It's not on the public data.
Right.
It's just our project goal.
Right.
Like I said, if BN, for example, wants to make a website that says these are all the horrible BAP candidates, right? And they want to use the data to have all the pictures, that's fine as well. Of course, they'll get sued by BAP, but that's okay. But they can build a website. They can build a nice website with all the data from here quickly, right? So that we don't, CNAR stays neutral in this sense. The database is open for whatever use that you want to have. You can, but for the blacklist criteria, this is specific to the CNAR candidate website.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have a criteria, and you can give me feedback within next week. Oh no, actually within the next few days. Actually, then I'll have this feature in where you can add a thing.
Okay.
I would recommend it to be pretty quick, as well as if anybody else has any. Right now, I think most of the criteria is what people are interested in, right? Whether are they corrupt? Do they have their basic CV? Have they sexually harassed anybody? Have they done hate speech? I think that's the basic things. Anything extra, I'm not sure. Like the pledge for asset declaration, that was something that C4 had, but I can't think of any more. Maybe an environmental group might have something. Then you can ask me, does this person support green energy or something? The reason I don't add that inside, because it's actually really hard to get information on that from politicians. If you ask them, what's your position on something, they're like, I think I support everything that's good for Malaysia. It's really hard to pin them down for specific issues, right? But you can try, and I can add that, right? So the last time somebody did this was the nut graph a few years ago. So they actually had some categories. Do you support or against LGBT rights? Do you support freedom of religion? Sadly, in Malaysia, those things are really hard to get answers from politicians from. Even Nurul Izzat got into a lot of trouble just for supporting freedom of religion. But in theory, if you have a couple of these good categories as an NGO, let me know. I can put it in, how much data we can have, but at least it's a start. Yeah.
While we are collecting all this data, we put it in one collective sheet so that, like ESM one is the asset declaration. So I'm researching the stuff in there.
Okay, I mean that's I don't think I'm doing that as a collective thing. For the CVs, it's going to be a really hard effort to collect everything in one place. You can if you want to, but right now all the candidate parties, they all have their own websites and whatnot. So the best thing that I can think of for the CVs is that we just upload them into the links in, because the sources can be from anywhere. It can be email, PDF, and so on. In theory, we could, but then that's another list of the hundreds of candidate CVs. It's a good idea. We could just make a Google Drive. Yeah. So maybe we can have just a Google Drive where everybody just shares folders. Yeah, I think that's the best way for those videos, campaign leaflets and whatnot. Okay, I think, any questions on that? I think that's about it. The bulk of the work is that spreadsheet. If we can get as much information, then the secondary work is, if you're interested, is to help find cases where there's corruption or so on, or sexual harassment, hate speeches, and so on. I think it'll be a good trial, but I'm not entirely sure how far we can get with that. I suspect there will, but the problem is that how many of you are going to watch YouTube videos of all the charamas? The other difficulty I have with this is that unless you're actually at the charama or it's actually reported by a newspaper that's legit, it's hard to verify any of the videos on social media. Was it a charama last year? Was it this week? Was it really him? Was it like it's so when you, it's kind of dangerous to put that kind of information. But if it's a real record, you know, Kini TV has it on record, there's an audio, it's reported, then that's something that we could possibly add. So I didn't focus too much. This is a nice feature to have on the website, but it's going to be really hard to collect specific cases of it. I think, but if we can't find it, it's a good thing because it means that we've pressured them to not say stupid things already, right? Yeah. Okay, so everybody's okay? Any other questions? I think that's about it. It's just a spreadsheet, but it's the best that we can do. So even if some of you only update 5, that's 5 entries that we never had before. So yeah. So that's all. I think that's it. Because they're going to kick us out at 1. But if any of you have any other questions on how we do stuff, I actually have all the other things that we're working on.
In terms of like human user and contributions, right? How do you plan to like moderate, like how you get monitored such?
I mean, that's about it.
That's about it.
Because the reason that we, from experience before, when you have a really big group of people that you don't know, almost all of them disappear within the first week.
Okay.
And then.
Because I was thinking I could have a couple of friends.
Yeah, then you should invite them to the channel. And if I think that's a much better way. If somebody is interested, just let them know. But if you're just in a general one, it's hard because the last time we did it in 2013, people cut and pasted random stuff.
Right.
In not really in trouble, but somebody in Sarawak or something put in some whole bunch of things that were unsubstantiated. Said this guy was corrupt or something, whatever it is, and I don't even know who that person was. So we just had to remove it. So yeah, it's better that we have an organic small group of people rather than so many. Because crowdsourcing, because the other thing that we have to remember is that everybody's going to be reusing this data, including ourselves. So yeah, we need to make sure that we ourselves are happy with the data that we use. So all those questions on citations and stuff is really important because if I can't use it. One mistake that I had before was we didn't have citations. So in GE14 we had a lot of data on all these politicians. When I uncovered the Sable guy, for example, for MACC, I was at an anti-corruption thing, and they wanted to run a story on that day on what we found from the database, but I had no citations. So they couldn't run the story. Even though the data all showed that it was definitely him. 3 years later, what happens? He gets arrested by MACC. So yeah, if we're not careful with it, it becomes useless for ourselves as well. So yeah, organic. Friends that you trust, and then the chat room is there for anybody to ask questions. So I would rather it's slow and steady rather than a lot and fast. Yeah. That's cool. We don't have much of a budget, so there's some coffee in my But the last thing before I go, this is ongoing. So after the elections, a lot of us will still keep updating this, especially for the MPs. We will try to, because we constantly try to improve it, because we have nothing from before.
So believe it or not, some of these guys, even though they did not actually get elected, ends up in some cases, because quite a number of the unelected ends up as board of directors of something, which ends up in some court cases, scandal or whatnot. And
so even the candidates is really valuable information. Why? A lot of the candidates that are going to lose are going to be appointed to GLCs. so we need to track them, right? Yeah, and this happens for both. You'll notice that if it's a Pakatan Harapan candidate, if they miss, they're going to get a position in a Selangor government think tank or something like that, right? So we got to track them as well, and what they do. If they lose, are they given contracts afterwards? So all this information will be really useful for a lot of different things.
So even the data like on nominees will still be...
Yes, it's so right now let's check.
So at least we know from history, we link some companies. So the companies like NDB, I think. So a number of them are actually candidates.
Yeah. So as of now, we have what 4,490 names in this list, and I keep searching on them, right? So a common use case for this is that all the nominees and candidates will be in there, and we also keep track of the posts that they hold. So separate from this effort, right now we're saying this is a person who is a member of a party. We actually put this person as a board of director of XXXX. So
like MPs who have siblings who are.
Yeah, we have the feature, but we haven't added it in yet. So for those of you interested in transparency, the database that we have is actually able to map out what we call a politically exposed persons.
So what we have is we have people, organization, and more importantly, we have people and the relation to the organization.
Is it still not the Chinese map influence?
Oh yeah, connected
that's a very good example.
So the latest feature we have is the relation between people. So that's where the family.
So this is something for you developers to think of. In theory, if we get more and more of this data, the idea was this. What's her name? Irene. Yeah. Irene did this, and all this work that we're doing in Malaysia was because I was kind of inspired by what they did at Thomson Reuters. So what they did was all these little bits of information that we have and all the different people and their relationship with each other, they were able to do a visualization. For example, let's say it's the committee, and yeah. So with this data, we're actually able to do something like how their power is, right? And who's under which area and which party. So, right, so for some of them, we can actually map this out. This is for developers to try out.
Yeah. So that's how we prove the button. We show that the button will be quite interesting. So even though we do not have people and people, there is purely like people and companies. So I realized that chain of people.
I did a couple. For example, I tweak this now and then. Mara. Might get in trouble for this, but it doesn't matter, right? So this is a graph. Let's see how. Who is this guy? I don't know.
New image. There's an image.
That's interesting. I searched that. This is a guy from Open Contracting. Yeah, so it's kind of small, but I was able to, for example, all the candidates who are members of UMNO, when I added their name to the Mara Board of Directors, I can immediately tell who's from UMNO or not. So when we're adding this data, we're adding, remember, DAP, UMNO, and so on. If we add another organization, let's say, I don't know, FELDA, FGV or something like that, and we add the board of directors and we put the same names, in the database, they're actually the same people. So I was actually able to see how everybody is linked in Mara. So in this case, anybody who's a member of UMNO, if I put them on the board of director, I immediately know that they're also a member of UMNO. So most of the board of directors of Mara, for example, are all UMNO elected representatives. Mara Inc. is, what's Mara Inc.? Did I do it? Yeah, Chairman, Mara, okay, yeah, so Mara Inc., if I'm not mistaken, for somewhere else, was also 2 representatives in Sabah. And the Sabah pipe deal, their names came up again. So I didn't have the company for that, but if I had the company, I could see that this person was also in Mara, is also in the pipe deal, and I found out that they also have some dodgy offshore companies as well, buying properties in London. So I think Rafizi got one, I have another one. So yeah, so this information is very useful for a lot of other uses as well. But that's for a different workshop. So, so I think before I wrap it up, thank you so much. Like, I mean, as I said, it's only a small group of people helping out to do this, but it's the best that we will ever have, and we'll keep doing it. So yeah, expectations, the best that we can get, and that's what we will have for the motion. And all this, I'm not sure if anybody else is going to be building off this API, but it'll probably be the first time ever that we actually have a candidate website for all the DOMs and MPs. Before this, there's never a place that you had good comparison for. So it might not be perfect, but it's the best that we've ever had. So yeah, it's the first go. So yeah, so thank you for making your time on Saturday and then helping out. So if the GE14 website, so on the chat, if some of you are already in there, GE14 chat. If you're not, just poke the main channel, the copy PM.
Look at Sydney.
Oh, Justin Chu. Okay, see, so Justin's not here.
No.
Okay, so Justin is another person who's also, she's been around for a long time, and she also helps contribute now and then. So she's also in there now contributing. So at the top of it is the starting page with all the information and links that I've just covered. So it's not perfect. If there's more that you want to add, feel free to edit, and I can give you permissions. It's a collaborative thing. So, all right. So that's about it. So thank you for coming. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
if you want to contribute, we just open the sheet and request.
Yeah, and permissions, and then start updating it. Yeah, and pick whichever one you want. Like, it's all voluntary, so yeah.
So who wants to play Mario Kart?
Can you bring a switch? And
To be a switch party.
So if you guys have